Okay.
And you're on.
Okay, and good evening, and welcome to Thinking Green. I'm your host, Janice Janistak. And this evening I've got sort of a special little show planned. My first guest is Rob Schacht, otherwise known as Digga, from Huntsbrook Farm. And if you shop at our local co-op in New London or buy locally through CSAs, you probably know about him and Teresa and their wonderful produce. And then for the second half of the show, we're going to have Teresa Bissett on to do a demonstration of worm composting. So if you're interested in composting or what the heck do worms have to do with it, stick around for that. First, we're going to start out. Rob, thank you once again for coming back on. It's good to see you again.
Thanks for having us.
Now, you've, as I've mentioned, your produce has been, we've been selling it at Fiddleheads throughout the year. You're located in Quaker Hill.
Right, we're up on Huntsbrook Road.
And when people come into Fiddleheads, they expect organic. But you are what's called a Farmer's Pledge farmer. Can you just explain briefly?
Sure.
Because I know a lot of people are still confused. Difference between organic and Farmer's Pledge?
Well, the Farmer's Pledge was started when the USDA took over organic certification from the NOFA groups, or the Organic Farming Associations that each state had. And it was kind of the grassroots response to the federal government getting involved, because it really was a grassroots thing that started the whole organic movement in the first place.
Right. And about what year was that the government took over standards? It was like in the 90s? Or sooner than that?
8 years ago, maybe, 9 years ago, somewhere in there. I don't have a strong recollection. I was certified organic the year before it happened. And then it was like too much. And for me, you know, for small farms, I should say, that deal with their local communities and deal with 90% of their customers face-to-face, and or have an interface like Fiddleheads, who is a trustworthy interface to, you know that they're sourcing their stuff from folks that they trust. It's all about trust, is really what Farmer's Pledge comes down to.
Well, but technically, what does it mean? Because I help out at Fiddleheads, and I get that question a lot.
Technically, it means that we follow the same standards that an organic certified farm does. We just do it where we look you in the eye and tell you that we're doing it, and you either have to believe us or not.
So why was it too much to try to maintain that government seal of approval? What's at issue here?
There's an expense to it. There is mountains and mountains and mountains of record keeping that you have to do. And I'm the first to admit, I'm not a great record keeper. The last thing I want to do after working in the field for 12 hours is come in and try to remember everything I did all day long. I mean, I keep pretty good logs on my nutrient management in my fields, but I don't want to necessarily weigh every pound of everything that I harvest and have to keep track of every little thing that they want you to keep track of under organic certification. We kind of focus on the fact that we're dealing with local people. We invite anybody who is interested in knowing what we do to come to the farm, or call us up and we'll tell you. But it's really about the way we believe that local food should be. It should be know your farmer and know where your food's coming from, and that's the best way to have faith in the safety and the quality of the food that you're getting.
So people can just, if they want to, they can just visit you and Teresa and in Waterford, or call ahead, or is it kind
of... people can come to the farm, and if we're busy, we can't necessarily stop and spend a lot of time with folks to walk them around, but certainly people could call and say, hey, I'd like to come and have you show me your operation. Can we make a time to do that? And we do that.
Right. And if somebody's doing a CSA with you, they're coming to you.
Or they're coming to the farm every week. Absolutely.
Okay.
So,
speaking of CSAs, you were mentioning to me something about how important it is to start planning for next year if you're interested in getting if you're not just as a farmer but as a consumer.
Well, a lot of the farms start marketing their CSAs in January. And there are a limited number of farms around that do CSA programs, and with limited shares. And a lot of them have a lot of past members that are going to sign up again. So the available slots for new members is a limited market out there. And so if it's something somebody really wants to do, they should be thinking about that. ahead of time.
And just, I think most of our audience probably understands what a CSA is, but just briefly, can you give me just like the very short definition of it?
CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture, and it's a way that customers can have a direct relationship with the farms that grow their food, the land on which it's grown, and the people who grow it. And it's a really nice thing for us farmers because the amount of outlay that we have at the beginning of the season, long before we ever even produce anything to start making any income back, is pretty big. You know, we grow on about 3.5 acres, and we probably have a $15,000 to $18,000 startup cost. And if I had to borrow that money every year or try to save that money from the previous season, it's just a lot of planning. So to be able to do that through a CSA program, and so what happens with a CSA is that people prepay and basically get to come to the farm once a week throughout the growing season. So our CSA is 18 weeks. It runs from the middle of June to first or second week in October. And they get to leave with a big basket of a little of everything that's coming off the farm at that time of year. And it's totally seasonal eating. You know, it doesn't work for everybody. Some folks find out that it's too much food. It's a shared risk. So every year things do well and things do bad. And so if somebody wants something in particular and it's just a bad year for that particular item, they might not get it. And so that tends to turn people off sometimes. But usually, I mean, the variety, our CSA baskets tend to have anywhere from like 10 to 15 different crops in them. And so, you know, the variety is pretty good, and it forces people to think about cooking and doing all those things that people don't necessarily have a lot of time to do either. So people really learn about their eating habits when they try to do this. Some people will do it and they're sold. They're going to do it for as long as they can. Other people, they try it for a year and they're like, I had enough. So.
I did it. My partner and I did it 1 year, and it was. We don't eat a lot, and it was just too much for us. But we were able to get half shares. Can people do that if they join your CSA? If they get a half bushel instead of a bushel?
We're offering a limited number of half shares this year. We're going to try it. And no, people can't get a half of a bushel because I haven't figured out how to cut a head of lettuce in half.
But whatever your full bucket is,
the way our half shares are going to work is somebody's going to be able to come every other week and get a full share.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it just means they'll have to work a little harder to store the full share and use it up over the, use the more perishable things first. And so it requires a lot of planning to be a part of a CSA. You have to really think about how you're going to cook and what you're going to cook. And we have some members who literally take 90% of their share and make soups and things like that and freeze them and eat them through the wintertime. So, I mean, they're totally thinking forward about, their food. But, because you get to this time of year, we're close to the shortest day, and there's people start missing that summertime food. And
how do people find out where they can join a CSA? Like, what would be closest in this area? Is there like a guidebook, a website?
The best place to go is to the Connecticut NOFA website. NOFA stands for National Organic Farmers Association.
So that's CTNOFA.
NOFA, and they have a farm and food guide that they put out, and it has counties. Everything's separated by county, and you can go in and you can find all the farms, what towns they're in, and there's a write-up on each farm and what they do. And so you can really find, in particular, what's available in your area.
So Google CTNOFA, and it'll take you there, and you get all the information you need.
Yep.
Speaking, you were mentioning a moment ago about making the summertime food stretch into the winter and all that. There's a big emphasis in what I call the new food movement, or whatever you want to call it, new local food, on eating seasonally, and it's something I hear about a lot. Putting it into practice is a little harder. if you're in the north. I mean,
And
what...
if you like tomatoes.
Which, I mean, yeah, which is definitely not a seasonal thing, but,
No.
you know, it's interesting, it's like everybody wants lettuce all year round.
Well, and we can grow lettuce almost all year round
Really?
in New England. We are growing lettuce and selling it to fiddlehead. Well, we're growing spinach right now and some Asian greens that we're selling to fiddleheads. I think Provider Farm from up in Salem had some cut lettuce mix at fiddleheads right now.
Right.
And we're all starting to work and look and make the investments into our farms to expand that seasonal production. It requires some infrastructure to do it, which is an expense, and we're all, you know, still working on trying to figure out how to make a living at this, let alone invest in it. So we're doing it slowly so that we don't get ourselves in
So
debt.
the farmers are you working together, sharing ideas with one another?
I think there's a great network of farmers out there, and yeah, there's a lot of idea sharing, a lot of seminars. NOFA holds a lot of seminars where they bring people who are doing successful operations, and they hold educational tours for other farmers who can go and learn from them. And so yeah, we have a great network of a great community of farmers in New England as a whole. You know, and we go to seminars at Rhode Island NOFA and NOFA Mass and NOFA New York. I mean, there's a lot of activity in the local food movement.
Are you growing anything right now? I've seen your, by the way, you and Teresa invited me once to your farm, and we got to go into your greenhouse, and the greens, the amount of greens, and this was the end of the season, was just tremendous. So do you have anything that you're growing right now, or are you getting ready for the coming spring?
We have spinach that we're harvesting right now, and we have Asian greens that we're harvesting right now. We were harvesting out of the field. We were harvesting carrots and Swiss chard and kale and bok choy and things like that up until just a few weeks ago. So, you know, it's been a mild fall.
It's been very mild. The weather it's amazing, and it's also frightening when you think about the larger, you know, global implications of, you know, global climate change and all
Well,
that.
last year was a very interesting year with the mild winter that we had, because the disease and insect pressure was intense.
Was it?
And, you know, for us organic folks, it requires a lot of extra combating to deal with those issues. So, but yeah, I mean, we've seen 2 mild winters in a row, which is pretty odd. And this winter is just beginning, so I mean, let's not you know, put the
True, but I mean, it is almost
I would
Christmas.
love a month of freezing weather and let the ground freeze, and even a little snow would be nice, but that could wait till February. I'd be happy if it waited till February.
So what does eating season, so we're in New England, so what would or what should ideally eating seasonally look like?
Okay, so well, all of the greens that we just talked about, you can grow year round.
Right.
So that's seasonal eating. This time of year, eating root crops that have been stored. So Provider Farm is selling beets and rutabagas and turnips and winter squash and things like that to fiddleheads right now. So you can get quite a bit of produce that's grown locally and organically right at fiddleheads.
Now, this is the time of year, and I've got a whole bag of them right in my fridge, of Brussels sprouts.
Brussels sprouts, absolutely.
Is that actually a seasonal thing, or is that just something that gets sold this time of year and we associate with winter?
No, it takes a full season to grow Brussels sprouts. So you could start them very early in the spring and harvest them in the summer, but Brussels sprouts are their best after they've gone through a frost. So the strategy is to grow them for the latter half of the growing season and let them go through a frost or 2 or 3 or 4, the more the better, and they just get sweeter and sweeter and sweeter, and they go from that kind of bittery, cabbagey kind of flavor to a really sweet and lovely little morsel.
They're one of my favorite things, and if anybody's ever gone to the recipe blog for Fiddlehead's website, last year we posted some recipes, and we had some demand to repost them this year.
I bought some of the Brussels sprouts at Fiddleheads a couple of weeks ago, and they were good.
They're very good.
They have been frosted.
Yeah, okay,
I can tell they have been.
Yeah, in fact, I had some for dinner tonight.
Yeah.
Something you mentioned a couple minutes ago about infrastructure and the expenses that go into that. I'd heard something from a little bird earlier today about some issues that farmers are having with tax abatements on structures and improvements.
Well, it's not
can
really.
you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's not really an issue. I mean,
But it's something that you have to deal with as a farmer.
Sure. I mean, everybody pays taxes. And the legislature, and I think the realization that farms in general are somewhat of a fragile industry, and the consequence of losing a farm usually means you lose the land,
Right.
because it gets developed. And so it's a forever loss. And so I think society as a whole is starting to understand that the more you can do to help a farmer be sustainable and have a viable operation, the better. And so within, and I forget what public act it is, but within a piece of legislature that was passed in Connecticut, it allows individual towns to pass an ordinance that will exempt structures exclusively used in agriculture from property taxation. And you know, for me, I have just put this forward in Waterford. I seem to have good support for it, and hoping it will pass in February. You know, I'm building my farm out of pocket, and am working towards trying to figure out how to make a living at it. And so any cost savings that I can add to my operation is, especially fixed costs like this, are a good thing, because you know, you don't realize that like we have about a 16-week season where we do farmers markets in the summertime. If you have a rainy day, it might cut that income for that day in half or even 3/4.
Right.
You know, you just don't make it, and you don't make that up.
Yeah.
You know, when Irene came through last year, it probably took out $2,000 to $4,000 worth of crops out in my field. You know, and that's speculative, because it's like, okay, well, how long would that crop have lasted?
Right.
Might have lasted another week, might have lasted another 4 weeks. I don't know.
Right. Were you affected by Sandy this year?
Not so much. Not so much. We learned a lot last year from Irene, so we hunkered down and really had an okay time this time, except for the power outage. You know, we can't refrigerate anything when our power's out, because we don't have a generation system yet. So,
Which is another huge expense.
another expense.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the thing about farms. As you grow to meet the demand that's needed, every time you grow, you have to expand your infrastructure to help make your production efficient.
Right.
And so it's like, it's a never-ending outlay on.
But you can't. But then you can't predict if you're going to get that back.
Well,
You know, one bad storm or something.
One
and
bad storm, one bad
Yeah.
infestation. You know, just there's a lot of things that go wrong for whatever reason. Some years, some things do great, and then the next year they don't. And I don't necessarily know that there's a solid reason for that. I'm sure that scientifically, you know, you can send tissue samples, and you can send soil samples, and you can try to figure out what's going on. But sometimes things just happen in farming.
Do you feel like the state, and I know there's the Connecticut Department of Agriculture, and there seems to be kind of a growing awareness, okay, we've got to save and promote Connecticut farmland. Do you think that the state is doing all it could be, or are there other things that could it be doing more to help and promote farmers and save farmland?
I think the state's doing an awful lot, and they do a good job. The state of Connecticut Department of Ag has got some very dedicated folks working for them who are pretty passionate about farms in Connecticut. Governor Malloy seems to also have a pretty strong interest in farms. He's really pushing to utilize this program that he started with expanding farmland, so taking land that's been out of production and investing in what it costs to clear it again and turn it back into a productive piece of property. So yeah, you know, they have a decent grant program. I've utilized grants quite a bit at my farm to help build my infrastructure. I don't think I could be doing what I'm doing if I didn't have access to that.
That's good.
And so, at least not as well as I hope I'm doing it. You know, so that's kind of the best I can say about Connecticut. I mean, there's a lot of the private organizations like the Connecticut Farmland Trust and groups like that, which have a lot of big name support and a lot of big money behind it, and they have preserved a lot of really beautiful farms in Connecticut. You know, I don't necessarily know. My farm's 88 acres, but from a soil standpoint, I really only have 5 or 6 acres of tillable soils, and which would be considered, you know, high quality agricultural soils.
Right.
So I don't know that a farm like mine would necessarily qualify for the type of preservation that they're really looking for. They're really looking for big properties that have really high quality soils.
Right.
And even though the soil I grow in is really high quality, it's just limited, you know. So, so yeah, there's some good efforts going on in the state of Connecticut.
Well, good. It's nice
There
to
could
hear.
always be more.
Right.
There could always be more.
And what? How can consumers help? Just by buying, by going to the CSAs, just changing the way and looking for local produce, or can they do more? Can they, you know, write to their government or support organizations like NOFA?
Certainly supporting organizations like NOFA is a good thing. You know, they're a great grassroots source of information and group purchasing and different things like that we do with NOFA. But really, I mean, like you said, it's a mindset about how people eat that I think is the bottom line when it comes to supporting local farms. You know, go to the farmers markets, go to the retail outlets that sell local produce, become a CSA member. You know, the CSA concept was designed to be the end-all in preventing farms from failing.
Right.
Because the whole concept was developed in Japan after World War II when Tokyo was developing, and the outskirt farms around Tokyo were disappearing very fast. And a group in the neighborhood went to a farmer and said, "We want you to be our farmer. We're going to support you. If there's crop loss, you know, we'll share in that loss, but we don't want your farm to go away. You know, please stay."
I didn't know that was the origins of it.
Yeah, there was also some history that went into I think Germany as well, but yeah, the same kind of mindset. You know, if you lose a farm, you tend to lose it forever. Other than the gentleman on Fog Plain Road in Waterford who tore the house down next to him and built a big garden there.
Right,
So
right.
that was great. But,
So basically, this isn't just a local thing, and it's not something that just popped up in the 1970s or a hippie thing. It's very much a global movement.
well, it did start back in the 70s.
Here in America.
Here in America, right. But maybe even in the 60s. But it has really recently, in the past 10 or so years, become a much more powerful movement. And I think I can trace it back to the first spike in fuel prices. That's when I noticed a huge shift in
Nixon era?
collective. No, 5 or 6 years.
Oh, okay. Oh, the more recent. Okay.
The first time gas hit $4
Oh,
a
gotcha.
gallon,
Okay.
that's when I noticed a huge shift in social consciousness around food and how fragile our food system really can be. I mean, if you think about it, I think if all food transported to the east side of the Hudson River were to stop coming,
Right.
I think there's like a week's worth of food in New England.
Interesting.
Yeah, you know. So, you know, people don't really think about that because the trucks keep coming. But
Right. Right.
that's
And things still come from Holland and Mexico, and even if they're labeled
California,
organic, you know,
Florida.
you wonder yourself what's what's really the cost here in terms of, you know, gasoline pollution and so forth.
sure.
So if somebody wants to get involved with the CSA, such as yours, they better start planning now. They can go to the Connecticut NOFA website.
You can go to the Connecticut NOFA
find out?
website.
Okay.
They can go to our we do our marketing through a Facebook page and a WordPress blog, and
Right.
so they can look up Huntsbrook Farm on Facebook. Provider Farm up in Salem has a very nice CSA, and I
Right.
think Fresh New London offers a CSA program as well. So those are the three local farms that I know of right off the top of my head that do CSA programs.
In addition to all the farmers markets that you do, which are expanding every year.
Every town has
This last year
one.
was the new one in Waterford.
No, that's been 3 years
Oh, it's
now.
been 3? Okay. I've never gotten a chance to go to it because I'm always working on
Salem
that.
started one this year. A couple of new ones up in Norwich started this year. But the Basra market became very big this year. It had great success there.
So are the markets becoming a larger, representing a larger portion of your income?
In
terms of what you're bringing in?
We only do 2 markets.
Oh, okay.
You know, with our CSA and the 2 farmers markets we do, and then the wholesaling we do we sell to Fiddleheads, we sell to La Bella Aurora in
To where?
Niantic. La Bella Aurora, it's a small
Oh, the restaurant?
chef-owner
Yeah.
restaurant in Niantic. Great food. The Mystic Oyster Club out in Mystic, great food. In the summertime, the Noank Community Market, which is the new co-op that got started up where the old Universal Market was.
Right.
The Universal Market was our very first wholesale customer.
Oh, nice.
So the gentleman that owned that, we were very fond of that place. So we're still bringing stuff out there
So
too.
keeping the tradition.
Yeah. And,
And then what's going to be on tap for, in terms of what you're growing for the spring and some of the first crops we can expect?
well,
From you.
spring crops are pretty much almost always greens. You know, Asian greens, bok choy, Napa cabbages, head lettuce. Those are the first things that start to come because they grow quickly. Radishes, you know, they do well in cool weather and they come quickly. So, but it all depends on Mother Nature. So if we have a snowy April, we won't be growing anything till May.
Yeah.
So, you know, we just go with the flow and deal with what comes.
Well, it sounds good. Jigga, thank you very much.
Thanks, Janice.
For coming on. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Always a pleasure to be here.
And we are, which camera are we on this time? That one, the little red light. Okay, folks, Digga is going to take off, and we are going to set up for Teresa Bissett and the worm composting. In the meantime, though, we're going to have a little shorter than usual. Is it a shorter calendar or a longer one? It's a shorter one, okay. We're going to have a little community calendar, give you a little time to find out about some news you can use, events, and grab that second bottle of water in case you need it. And we're going to be right back, and we're going to have a demo, and we'll see you soon.
Hey.
that one? Oh, we're already on. Hello. And welcome back to Thinking Green. And let me get these glary things out of here. I am your host, Janice Janistak, and my second guest of today, and you've seen her before on our show, is Teresa Bessette. And Teresa, very good to have you on again.
Janice, it's good to be here, yeah.
And we're going to do a little demo and talk about worm composting. Now, I do composting at home with the big pile and the layers and blah, blah, blah. What is worm composting? How's that different from the standard understanding of what we do with compost?
Well, first of all, worms in any healthy compost pile, outside or inside, worms will be there. It's a sign of a healthy, thriving, stable composting compost pile.
Right.
So for indoor composting, we use the worms to accelerate the whole composting process. So especially in the wintertime, in this area, it's not always convenient to be composting outside.
Right.
So a lot of people I know will keep their vegetable scraps in a bin on their kitchen counter. And actually what's happening there is you're just having your stuff kind of rot.
Right.
So what I'm going to show you how to do is create a composting bin for indoor use.
People can compost indoors. If you don't have a big pile outside, if you don't have a big yard, if you have an apartment, you can do it. And it doesn't smell?
It doesn't smell. A healthy, stable worm composting unit won't smell. No.
Okay.
No smell. So yeah, it's very simple. It's very, very simple, and everybody should do it.
And is this a new technique, or is this?
Oh gosh, no.
Okay. I wasn't sure. It's like if somebody one day, hey, said, like, we can adapt this, but in terms of bringing it indoors and all of that.
I don't know that people have been bringing it indoors. I don't know. Maybe people have forever. There's certainly nothing new about worms composting.
Right.
I mean, most of the dirt that's out there on the planet is
right.
You know, the worms doing their thing. So at any rate, this is. I mean, it's a great project for kids. It's wonderful for kids. Sort of puts everybody in touch with what's going on in nature.
Okay, so how does this work?
So, okay, first of all, you want to start with a bin. There's a couple different options with the bins. You can find commercially made bins. There's one called, I think, the worm composter, and there's the worm motel.
I've seen that. Some of them are cloth, even though.
No, they're not cloth. They're usually plastic,
okay.
And they have they're different designs. A couple of them have different layers of trays that you can use. I know people that have used them, and they've had success. To me, they seem very, very labor intensive, because I think my method's pretty simple. So, and it's not my method. It's just, I mean, this is a pretty common way of composting.
I'm all for simplicity. So.
Yeah, simple is good. And you can use stuff that you have at home. So you really shouldn't have to spend any money buying anything. Okay. So there's the commercially available ones, which they are there if you're interested in that. Another option is to build a bin out of wood.
Right.
And I just want to comment on that. Wood, if you do choose to use wood, don't use any treated wood. Because the chemicals and that stuff will leach into the worms, and they're toxic to the worms. So really the best thing is the little plastic tote.
Okay.
That's perfect. This is the smallest size that I would do. I wouldn't go any smaller than this.
This is about like how many quarts, or what's the?
I think it tells me right
capacity?
On here. It's 15 quart.
Okay. Okay. And
you've 15 quart bin.
It looks like you've got holes.
Yep, I'm going to show you that.
Okay.
Yep. So you're going to take your bin. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to put some drain holes in the bottom. So, and I just drilled some holes. And then what you want to do is you want to drill holes around the perimeter of the top there.
Okay, but Bob, were you getting this?
Holes, and these will be the air holes, because they need air.
Okay.
Okay.
So what are the bottom holes for?
Drainage.
Drainage, okay.
Bottom holes are for drainage. Now, I do this extra step, not everybody does, and but I use screen. This is just regular hardware screen, the kind of stuff that you use to fix your screen windows when they rip.
Exactly. And you can just get that at any hardware store.
Any hardware store, yep. So you're just going to cut a piece to fit on the bottom, place that on the bottom. And then what I also do, and I think maybe this is a little going overboard, but I also take some screen and I tape it around the air holes across the top. just because
Oh, I see. So on this side, so on the, you
I've already
tape it
done
on the
it there.
inside. So if I
Yeah,
hold this
so
here.
I'm going to tape the screen
Okay.
over those holes.
Okay. And why do you do that specifically?
I do that because I do not want my worms to escape.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes lots of sense. We like this idea.
Yes.
Okay.
I just feel better, especially if I'm going to be keeping them in the kitchen. And a lot of people will do this and keep the worms under the sink in
Right.
the kitchen, so which is a great place. I actually keep my bin in the basement, but and I still do this. So I would go around and
All right.
and seal up all those holes, just so that we don't
Okay.
have a worm exodus. Okay.
So what's the next?
So, all right, you want your holes for drainage, you want your holes for air, and then you will need something to catch the material, the liquid that drains out of here. So, usually when you get these in the store, they're sold
With the lids.
yeah, and you can buy the lid separately. Get an extra lid.
Okay.
Because it's a great catcher.
So you need one. So you actually need one lid for
the
that
top.
bottom drainage, and then one for the top.
Yeah, or
Okay.
something for the bottom. You
Okay.
want to have something to
A
catch
tray,
some
something.
sort of tray. Yes, that's important. Otherwise, it can get very messy.
That's defeating the purpose.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so the next thing you want to think about is temperature, where you're going to put your bin. Worms are happy between 60 and 80 degrees. Ideally, 70, 75 is probably ideal, but 60 to 80 is okay.
Okay.
I think probably going hotter is more of an issue than going colder.
Okay.
You don't
So you're
want
talking kind of standard room temperature.
yeah, standard room temperature. But summertime, you just want to watch out for the heat. So think about that, the temperature when you're deciding where you're going to put your bin. Outside in the wintertime just doesn't work. It could if you were going to insulate the whole thing, and that gets a little bit more complicated. But we're going to work with a real simple bin here today. So
what's the next step?
okay, the next thing is. Talked about the location and the temperature. Okay, bedding material.
Okay.
Okay, worms need bedding material. They need some organic material to start with. So what I usually use is newspaper.
Okay.
And I just have some shredded newspaper right here. So just nothing fancy about that. Shredded newspaper, cardboard, sawdust, leaves.
But with the sawdust, you also want to make sure. I mean, isn't there an issue as well with terms of it being from treated lumber and
Right,
the,
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. You
So it has to be
wanna
from raw virgin.
Right, you want to keep
sources.
those kinds of things in mind. Dryer lint also will work.
Dryer lint.
Dryer lint, yes. Fabric, fabric scraps will work for bedding. Let me see, I have a list here. Straw, dried leaves, but newspaper is probably what most people have around. so-
Right. And this isn't very finely shredded. It's
No,
just
it's
basically
not.
strips.
It's just strips,
Okay.
yeah. So what you want to do next is you want to wet your bedding. So
Somehow that's a familiar phrase in from our childhood, but we were told the opposite. You don't want to wet your bed.
you want to wet your bedding, yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes. So we're going to do that. We're going to get it nice and wet. All right. Worms like moisture.
Okay, so that's almost, that's not quite dripping, but it's
Yeah.
pretty soaked.
We actually want to get it. You would
Okay. Can you
soak
see
it
this,
for
Bob?
maybe 10 minutes. It's just, can you see it?
Yeah,
It's
just to kind of bring up a
getting it
little
wet.
nice mess of it.
okay. And then now next, what we want to do is wring it out.
Okay.
Okay, because we don't want it soaking wet in here.
Gotcha.
Just wet.
So just wet. Okay.
And then we're going to kind of fluff it up
like that.
so it's not all matted. We
Okay.
don't want it matted down.
Gotcha. And about how many inches worth, or does it matter because it's all
You're
going to
going
kind
to fill it
of
up maybe about halfway with the bedding, the moistened bedding material. All right.
And there we are. Okay.
So there's
about
that.
Okay.
So, okay. And then the next step, and I'm going to put my gloves on for this because,
It's over here.
yeah, I have got a date afterwards. I don't want my nails.
You have a
I'm just
packed
kidding.
social schedule.
You're just going to mix in a couple handfuls of soil.
Okay.
Okay, and this happens to be just some potting soil that I had around.
So so it doesn't have to be fancy. You can go to the green to your.
You could go out and dig some out of your garden. Whoops.
But you do want to try to get soil that is organic, that is clean, that doesn't have.
Yeah, and one of the
toxins,
things
right?
you really want to avoid is bugs. You don't want to dig up a couple anthills and put it in here.
Okay.
So if you're going to take soil out of your garden, I would recommend like maybe letting it sit for a day or two just to get the bugs out of it. I'm going to add a little bit more water to this because with the soil it's just a little too dry.
Okay.
You always want your worm home to be, like I said, moist, not dripping wet, but we do have drain holes in here, so.
Okay, and you're still kind of mixing up the
Just kinda
soil and
mixing
the.
it up, yep.
Okay.
Okay, so.
Okay, we'll kind of like tip
that's-
this towards the.
Yep, so that's just the bedding and some dirt,
There we go. Can you see that, Bob?
and that's
Okay,
going to
great.
be their home.
It's gorgeous, isn't it?
Yes.
Indeed.
So, oh no, and we have a little bit of a drip going on here,
Oh,
but that's
okay. That's okay. We'll clean up later.
Okay, so next we have the worms. Okay.
Okay.
They want to be on television, so I'm going to.
And does it
actually-
now? Of course, I told you earlier I have a fondness of worms. What I was thinking of course, with the big earthworms that I love seeing in my compost, and
Yes.
go away, guys, run free, enjoy yourselves. Are we using earthworms here? Or is there a
Well, they
specific
are
type of worm?
There are about 4,000 different species of worms, okay?
Okay.
Not all worms are suitable for indoor composting. We want to use a species that is more of a ground feeder.
Okay.
And the ones that are most popular are the red wigglers, Acinia fetid, that's their Latin name. But the red wigglers are ideal for indoor composting. They feed on the top. They're very, very active.
Is that the same species that's sold at bait and tackle shops?
No, those are usually night crawlers.
Oh, okay.
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 And night crawlers will compost.
Okay,
but
this
they
I need
just-
my glasses for because
Okay.
I need to get a good look at this.
So I always wear gloves when I'm handling the worms, not because I'm afraid of them, but because they don't particularly care for human touch.
Interesting.
So there's dirt in here also. But can you see these?
Oh yeah.
Can you see all my
oh yeah.
worms?
Take a look at if you take a look. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That's
All right,
amazing.
great.
How many?
Yeah.
How many? Do you know how many worms estimated would be in a pile like this?
And, I don't know, hundreds.
Like hundreds? Yeah, okay.
So generally you want to start with a pound of worms. When you
Okay.
buy worms, they're sold usually by the pound.
And where do you buy them?
You can buy them. You can go online and buy them. There's a woman I know in Rhode Island who sells worms, and I can give you that resource at the end here.
Okay. Anybody locally? Or more local than Rhode Island?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
We were selling worms for a while, but it's very labor intensive to sort these worms out.
Right.
So it's quite a project. Anyway, these are the Acinia fetid. They're red wigglers. They are top feeders. They're not native to New England. They're native to more of the southern states. They generally. I'm told that they won't survive a winter here,
Okay.
but then others have told me that yes, in fact, they do. If they're in a compost pile outside, a working compost pile
Right.
that's generating heat, then in fact they'll migrate to a temperature that works for them, and
Right.
they will survive. So.
Well, these last few winters have been so mild anyway, but
yeah, we're going to see all kinds of changes in flora
Yeah.
and fauna.
yeah.
So anyway.
Next step with these guys, what do we do?
So now we're going to put them in here.
Okay.
I'm going to put them in.
And you've got the gloves, I'll let you do all that.
Yeah. And
And you're just sort of laying them in a single.
well, it doesn't
layer.
matter where I put them. They're going to
Okay.
go where they want to go.
Okay.
And you have to give, they're swarming.
Actually, why don't we can just fold that and
do that. Yes,
Yeah.
you could.
That's good.
Get them in there. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Alrighty. So we've got our moist bedding, we've got our worms.
Got our bedding, we've got our bin, we've got our bedding, we've got our worms, and then we've got the moisture that we need, and
Yep.
they're going to be in the temperature that they need to be at. One other thing I want to talk about, which is pretty important, is is light and the dark. Worms definitely prefer the dark. They are a little
Okay.
they're they'll burrow. I mean, in 5 minutes, we won't see any worms because they will have burrowed down. You can see them crawling away. At home with my bin, I keep them in the basement with a light on.
Yeah, there we go.
And that will prevent any worm exodus.
Okay.
In the dark, if you do keep them in the kitchen under the sink where it's dark, if your worm bin fails and the conditions become unfavorable to the worms, they will leave. So if it's dark, there's nothing to stop them other than the screen.
Right,
have a screen here,
okay, so they do need some light still.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you want to make sure that they're not going to go anywhere, keep a light on. I have them in the basement with a light bulb hanging over the bin.
Okay. So what happens next?
So now, okay, once you set up your bin like this,
And you have it in the place it needs to be.
and you have it in the place, yep. What you're going to do is you're going to cover it, and I used that one cover that I had for the bottom, but you would put that, you know,
The tray back,
the
lid back on.
The lid back on,
Right.
and I would let it sit for at least 3 days.
Without adding anything?
Without
else to
adding
it?
anything, yeah, just to let the worms acclimate. I think that's really important. A lot of people don't do that. They immediately start feeding them, and they need some time to acclimate to their new environment. So a couple days.
Okay.
And then after that, now you can start feeding your worms.
And do you need to keep like spritzing them, spraying them, adding
Yeah, you want
water?
to make sure that the moisture stays as it is. It's almost mud. Okay. It's a consistency of, you know, of mud. So now food. What do they eat? They love Digga's greens.
As we do too.
I know, we do too.
Yeah. And these have that smell. I can tell. There's the rotting green smell is.
Okay, and I'm glad you mentioned that. These aren't too bad. The real rotten stuff I'm not putting in here.
Okay.
You don't want to put rotten food in.
Okay. Because I think a lot of people would probably do that.
Yeah, you want it, you know, just at that point where you're not going to eat it, but it's not rotting yet.
Or the things like the scraps, the ends of the carrots, the skins of the onions.
Exactly, the potato peels, the peels from all of your vegetables, the beet greens if you're not going to cook them, which you should be cooking them. Any peels are great, apple cores, pumpkin rind, squash rind.
And it's probably a good idea to like cut them down. You don't need to puree them though?
You don't need to puree it, but you do need to chop it. And like 2-inch size chunks are fine. So,
and forgive me, I just can't help, no glasses, so I can't.
Okay. So anyway, you're going to feed them.
We're good.
You're going to feed them, and you're just going to put the food on top.
Okay. Oh, and also, I know with just regular composting, you don't want meat, you don't want animal bones, but eggshells.
Eggshells are
okay.
Eggshells are okay.
I like to crush mine when I'm.
Yep, and that's a good thing to do. Crush them up.
Yeah.
The eggshells actually are very good for the worms. They supply calcium, and the calcium helps to make their worm eggs a little bit stronger. So you would, I mean, that's probably about the amount of food that you would put into a bin this size.
That's
at any given
not
time.
a lot. That was just a couple of handfuls.
It was just a couple of handfuls until it really gets going. So you're going to put your cover back on, and that's it. You don't want to feed them again until at least 80% of that food is gone.
And about how long does that take?
It depends.
Would you, like with this sort of thing?
Right now, this would probably take maybe 4 days.
That's it?
With a new bin, yeah. Once the bin gets going and the worms start reproducing, you're actually going to have more worms. This could be gone in maybe 2 days.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. It's just absolutely amazing.
That's a lot faster than my big black plastic outdoor thing where we're shoveling on the stuff and it gets so heavy you don't even, it's almost too heavy to do the whole rotating thing you're supposed to do.
Yep.
And you don't...
Well, it's going to get heavy too because this food is going to get broken down to the castings.
Well,
and
not like the big 4-foot outdoor things though.
Yeah, those are heavy. Yeah. So you're going to cover it up, and I just once again just want to make the point of not overfeeding them.
Okay.
Because you don't want your food to start rotting. If your bin starts to smell like rotting food, then you're giving the worms too much food too fast, and that's not good. So
and the solution would be to just kind of pare back a bit.
Pare back, and one of the things you can do is you can freeze your scraps.
Oh, okay.
And I do that a lot,
Do
yeah.
you? Okay.
Yeah, because I go through binges of cooking.
Right.
I might do a whole lot of cooking one weekend and then not cook again for...
And then it adds a little moisture as it
Exactly,
melts.
yeah,
Okay.
it does,
So,
yeah.
but and then you also need to make sure you're spritzing or making sure the...
You want to watch the water
Okay.
content, yeah.
Do you
So,
ever need to add more bedding? Like another
I
layer
don't.
of paper or whatever?
No, I don't. After about maybe 6 months, what I would do is start a new bin.
Okay.
You screen this out, you screen it with just a regular garden box screener. So you're going to save your worms, and then you're going to put all this wonderful compost into your garden, and then start all over again. So,
4 minutes to go.
okay.
Well, that sounds wonderful. You've been doing this for how long?
A couple of years, yeah. Started doing it on a much larger scale. It became very, very labor intensive, and so now I just do it on a small scale for me.
I think I'm going to have to try this because
I'm going to probably give this to you.
I might take it home. It'd be wonderful. Because, I mean, the wintertime, it's just so hard
Yeah.
to try to compost things. And this seems very easy.
Yeah, I'm going to, yeah, this
You
will
can
be
do it in your apartment or
bin.
wherever.
Yep.
Fabulous.
Yep, it's a wonderful. It's just a wonderful project. It's great for kids. It's great for great way to make some contribution to minimizing the waste that
Right.
ends up. In
So
our
basically,
landfills
when it's completely broken down into what we recognize as nice composted
yeah, it's beautiful.
soil, then it's
Yeah.
it's good to go.
Yeah, yep, good to go.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
And if you're doing it in the wintertime, then you can store that soil.
You could store it, or you could just cut back on the number of worms in there and stop feeding it. And yeah, then you could store it.
Or could
Fine.
you put it like out in your garden, like your raised beds or wherever, and then just let it sit there for, or do you want to try to use it right away in some way?
No, well, you're not going to get rid of all the worms. There's still going to be some eggs and stuff in there. So I wouldn't put it outside until the spring, because that way the worms that were still in there
Gotcha, okay.
would survive.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So.
Well, that sounds great. Teresa, thank you so much
you're
for talking
welcome.
about this.
You're welcome.
Hope to have you on. Will you come on again for some other projects?
Sure, absolutely.
terrific.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I've had Teresa Bissett as my guest, and we've learned a lot about worm composting, and I hope you took away something that was useful. And I want to thank you again very much for coming on to Thinking Green tonight. I believe Rana will be coming back as host next week. Don't quote me on it. And also, very happy Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever you may celebrate. And until we meet again, Auf Wiedersehen.